Hello, everyone. I'm Daphne Russell, and this is Define This, a space where we reclaim and reimagine the words we think we understand. Every definition we carry was shaped by an experience, tied to a place, wrapped in an emotion, and often handed to us before we even had the chance to choose it for ourselves. Here, we slow down, we ask different questions, and we listen closely, not to what the dictionary says, but to what life has taught us. Each episode begins with one word and one person's lived definition. Thank you for being here. Let's begin. Today, we have Colleen Kelley, and we met over curiosity. Um,
Yes.
we were both like, wait, what are you doing? And she's like, what are you doing? And then we bonded over what we were doing. So I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then we're going to find out what she's going to define.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Daphne. We did meet over curiosity and just really big questions about literacy in general and what it means to both of us and the huge amount of intersection between what we're both curious about in regards to how people are in the world and how they perceive information going into their bodies and their brains and their souls. So who am I? I am a retired chemistry faculty member. For 30 years, I worked in higher education and taught thousands and thousands and thousands of students freshman chemistry or that first course in chemistry, but mostly I taught organic chemistry, which is a 200 level course. And during that time, I was privileged to teach those thousands of students, all of whom were very, very, very motivated and were getting A's in all of their other courses. I think they had A's in courses since they could tie their shoes. And I had overachievers in front of me, and then they hit organic chemistry, and it's the first time they falter academically, and it brings them to their knees and changes their lives dramatically with this perceived, what they call failure in an academic subject. And this happened year after year, and I was so confused. How are these otherwise high achieving students, um, again, in their words, failing chemistry? And a failure could be an 89. So I'm not going to define failure. Everyone has the right to define their own failures.
Right.
That's not up to me. Um, and when you look at the actual statistics of students who drop withdrawal or get less than a C in a second year chemistry course, it's about 50% for all students, and it's about 80% for underserved or underrepresented students. So, and that data hasn't changed in 30, 40 years. It's holding steady. It's not getting better. So that led to me to my big questions, like why are we accepting this? It took me a long time to realize we shouldn't be accepting this. Like that's like okay, this is bad, and we just keep shrugging our shoulders and saying this is hard. Let's go to another year
Right.
and without a change. And then why is it this way? Why does someone with my brain understand it and your brain doesn't? And what can we do to change it? Can we change this? So I retired in 2023, and now I am teaching preschool through fourth grade science in an attempt to understand what's happening in the developing brain and realizing that what I've uncovered is a term called molecular literacy, and that kids starting at about age 8 have the capacity to learn chemistry, probably a greater capacity to learn chemistry than students do when they're 18, 19, 20. And I use the music analogy for that. You would never send a child to college to be a music major when they've never read a sheet of music. If they're going to college to be a music major, they probably started as toddlers. If they're in that high performing music group. Yet we send them to be physicians without even having seen a periodic table at all, or maybe saw it when they were 17 for a flash. And so why are we doing that? Why are we expecting this miracle of mastery to occur when we cram it in so late when everything else is already shut down? So I'm on a mission to change that, and it's a simple fix. Just start introducing it earlier. That's all we have to do.
Period. Right.
Yeah.
just start introducing it. Well, I'm assuming I like to say this, like I could ruin any subject. People don't understand that. They're like, what? If it's robotics, just put the kid in robotics. I'm like, that's not a solution. Like a solution is changing the relationship, changing the perception. That's a solution. But just put him in robotics. I'm like, I could ruin robotics. I could ruin anything. Like if you do it right, you could ruin
Right.
all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So when you're saying creating this molecular literacy within them, I have you like 1,000 questions, but let's start with that. Like, what do you mean? How do you introduce it in a way that an 8-year-old goes, "Oh, I totally get this."
You treat it like story time.
Mm.
So kids love, everybody loves stories, right? So I created these stories, and the vehicle for delivery is a comic book, but there's also an accompanying audiobook where the characters in the comic book are in character, so their voices are different. They have, they sound like they look in the book. Um, so they are a cross between Scooby-Doo mysteries kind of things. Our meddling kids are two green twins, Poppy and Ray. And so there's this whole relatable story that's a mystery that you solve using chemistry, but the chemistry is really subtle. So it's some of the characters that Poppy and Ray encounter that are the villains are, they might be a molecule, right? There's the conniving Clive, who's chlorine Clive. He's a pirate. He has Lady Xenon trapped away, and he's requiring 1 million electrons in ransom,
Oh
right? And so
my gosh.
right? And so the vocabulary comes about in these stories. And when you're requiring 1 million electrons, they don't have to know what electrons are right away, but you're just getting the vocabulary in there, right? A million of anything sounds like, oh, yeah,
Right.
Lady Xenon's trapped away. And so really what I'm trying to do is make connections subconsciously with these different characters. And Conniving Clive, Chlorine Clive, does crave electrons. He's one of the most electronegative elements on the periodic table. So I make their characters seem to, or not seem, their characters do match their properties. So they're learning chemistry, but they're really just to their brain, they're looking at Big Ox is probably my favorite, and it's the element oxygen. And Big Ox is always jonesing for 2 electrons. And he has these like, it's like Scooby snacks for him, but he always carries around these two little yellow puff balls and is always like shoving 2 electrons in his mouth. And that's what oxygen does. Oxygen um, eats 2 electrons, or, gains 2 electrons pretty easily. So, but he's just this lovable, big, puffy character that you would expect oxygen to look like. If you had to make oxygen look like a character, well, there's the word ox, so that helps with the literacy part of it. And
Right.
he's blue and he's puffy and he's jovial and he's helpful, but he also is gassy. And, there's all this just fun stuff with Big Ox. And so the literacy piece comes from presenting it not as, well, if you teach them what the elements are used for, they'll be interested. I can tell you in 30 years that didn't help. And again, I think when you come from 30 years of higher ed, and again, students' words, not mine, failure after failure in especially as they go forward in chemistry, you realize that we have to change this relationship with these elements, showing them that, I don't know, sulfur is used in acne products is doesn't do it. You can make a periodic table with all the uses. They can write reports about the elements. Everything that is done doesn't work unless you think working is a 50% failure rate. If you think that's working, then go for it. But
Yeah, I know.
yeah, I don't think that's working.
That's like an F minus minus, people. Like when people are trying to discuss, literacy with me, I'm like, we have an F minus minus.
Yeah,
Like I don't know how to, and we've had an F minus minus for a really long time, right? So, hmm, maybe there's something we're missing.
maybe.
Maybe. God. Okay, 100,000 things. Um, I'm taking notes because I have to
Good,
like
good,
make sure I
yeah.
don't, yeah, I don't forget anything. So first of all, let's just go with clever, 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 clever idea. Just creating these characters into a cartoon that's like oxygen and he's jonesing for two elements,
Electrons. Yep.
electrons. So, like just being able to do that is you're manipulating at like a higher state of consciousness for these children. So you're like, hey, we're going to play up here, which means it's always there, right? It's always there for them to go back when they're like in seventh grade and the teacher's like, blah, blah, here's the periodic table. And the kid's like, I know. Oh, and then all of that stuff that you put in there with them, right? It's still there. And they can just, oh my God, this is what Colleen said. Oh, Miss Kelly, or however they refer to you, right? And they just start pulling them out, and then boom, it's all within them, and then all of that stuff makes sense. That's the
Yep.
concept, right?
Yep.
That's just so brilliant. And I love it. Also, I love the idea of the 8-year olds because my experience is that 7, 8-year old is like a little pliable, malleable little, and we just go, here. We don't care what you do with it. We're just not going to harm you with it.
Right. Right.
We're going to allow for you to get what you need, knowing the rest is actually going in. It's all going in, and then it's there. So while you were talking, I was like, is everybody I'm talking to like a giant Trojan horse? Like, well, I have this Trojan horse because you're talking about a Trojan horse. Like
Yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
sneaking
Yep.
into their unconscious. And the people I'm talking to in different conversations I'm having, it's like we're just sneaking on in and expanding in that unconscious space. And then when the conscious, however you want to describe those words perfectly, goes in and goes, oh, I'll take that, I'll take that, oh, I'll take that. But it's all this expansion that's happening that they can play with whenever they are ready to play with it.
Precisely. Yeah, yeah. And it's sticky, right? Like
Yes.
yeah, characters are sticky, stories are sticky.
Yeah.
Facts aren't sticky. They're going to go right in and out. So, yep,
How'd
yep.
that, oh, no, missed it.
Because I'm giving them a feeling,
Mhm.
right? So as they're reading, listening, participating, sometimes they read to each other in character. That's my favorite. And I don't prescribe any of this. They have one comic book and there's a group of three of them and they say, you be Poppy, I be Ray, you be Granny Eve, and they read in character. And when they stumble over a word, you can see the group empathy come by with it. They all stop together and sound it out and write it down and wonder. So there's a lot of stuff going on with this, but the sticky part comes from these experiences and these feelings, and they laugh together. And they're comic books, so they better be funny, and they are funny because I see their shoulders going up and down as they're reading, right?
Right.
And sometimes they just laugh out loud. And I can hear the laughter in the room when they're reading. And so that's all the sticky stuff. That's what persists so that when they get to college, they have that happy space to go back to
Mhm.
when it's being presented in a way that is inaccessible to them. They've got like a savings account ready.
Oh, I
When,
like that. Yeah.
yeah.
Have you read, I don't remember if we talked about that one day, but the book called Stereotype Threat by
No.
Claude Steele. So, Dr. Steele, forgive me if I don't quote everything perfectly, but Claude Steele um, recognized that they were asking, I believe it was Stanford, could be wrong about the college, but something like Stanford, a
Right.
somewhat high achieving place. In the math classes, so these people were purposely in the higher level math classes, and they found that they gave this test that everyone in the class should universally kind of do well on. They found that the women significantly scored lower. And so they're like, what the heck? Why would these women think for 1 second that they couldn't do this in this room? So they're like, huh, well, let's tell them they can. So literally just said, hey, men and women score the same on this test. And the scores went up. And I've been just like so in love with that test because I think that little short story is it's not just stereotype threat. It is literally beliefs. And what you were saying is that these high achieving kids, because they're kids, college kids, going to this class and then they like suddenly don't get it and it affects them immediately. And you're sprinkling in just a new thing that they think is inaccessible, and then suddenly you make it accessible and nothing's changed except they know it's accessible when your previous students didn't think it was accessible.
Right,
But
right,
it's still accessible. But now you're like, well, here's your evidence. You had Miss Kelly when you were 9 or whatever, you know?
right,
I just think
right.
it's all so fascinating as a concept because we're out there, you know, you and I especially are talking. People are looking at us and asking not questions of curiosity, but questions of funneling. Well, let me see if I can funnel her this way and prove her wrong, or funnel her that way and prove her wrong. But those people are not as interested as we are in this magical part
Yep,
of the
yep.
brain that goes, hey, you can. Now what?
Yes, yeah, yeah. We could get all of college chemistry done before, eighth grade, ninth grade. Um, and then, but the great thing about that, and what I'm trying to let people understand is that's how we raise the bar,
Yeah,
right?
no, I was,
Because, I know why you're laughing, but because then they can take, AP chemistry and actually pass it,
right.
right? And not pass it, but understand it, succeed. And then they get to college and their first class is organic chemistry and they just launch from there. So it is a mechanism of raising the bar by lowering accessibility, right? We make it more accessible early on. That raises the bar for everybody. And we're going to have, better science as a result, more scientists, less exclusive, more heterogeneous bunch, right? Because more people of more colors and genders and can do it. So it's just a clear way to broaden the base. And even if everyone doesn't want to be a scientist, we'll have attorneys who, maybe they're litigating a case where they have evidence that's scientific. That's not unheard of, right? They can actually understand it and not have to hire a subject matter expert,
Right.
right? So I think a global understanding, especially when our people who are calling themselves subject matter experts are questionable, right? I think we all have to become a little bit more savvy about what we used to call on the experts for.
Oh, I totally agree. Because okay, 18 thoughts again. Um, I want to start with, I'm going to get to certainty in a second about that comment you just made. But back up where you were just saying is like the whole point is if, for me, is if we don't have to talk about literacy anymore, and soon we don't have to talk about math anymore. What if we don't have to talk about chemistry anymore? And all of the things are completely dissolved as issues, and they are actually just the base of all of our knowledge. Then what? Right? Because
Yes.
it's like you're saying, then the whole base goes like this.
Yep.
Then what? And I just think I just want to be sitting on the beach, drinking my sparkling water. Because I don't drink. It doesn't sound like very exciting to sit there with a sparkling water, but that's what, maybe a ginger spritz. And I'm just sitting there watching the fireworks of the base going up, you know?
Yep. Yep.
I
Yep.
just think, oh, it's so beautiful. I want to go back to the idea of certainty because I have a new friend, Dr. Andy Johnson, and we were talking about certainty and like, and I have my stepson and I are working on something, and we are like, certainty is like the buzzkill. Like when somebody's certain, you're like, oh, why? You know what I mean? Kind of. So the people that you're saying they're experts, they're
Right.
certain. And as soon as someone's certain, I'm like, hmm, why are you certain?
Right. Right.
You know, do you have a, I don't know, do you have a thought about the certainty? Like someone, no names, we're not, but like how,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. I think it's funny actually. One of my favorite I don't know, principles in chemistry. And it goes back to one of my favorite eras. It's the 1910s, 1920s. So it's Einstein and a bunch of Marie Curie and a bunch of folks and Marie Curie's daughter, and they're all like talking about the structure of the atom, and they're unraveling it to be this whole like nebulous thing that we can't possibly understand. And there's a one scientist, his name's Heisenberg, and he comes up with this principle, which is, still held to be true today. It's called his uncertainty principle. And like, how great is that? Like,
Really?
Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And he just says you cannot know the location and momentum of an electron at one point in time. So, what I love about it and what maddens me about it is all these brilliant creative minds got together in Belgium in the 1920s and early 30s and uncovered all this. And really, what they came with this whole mystical, magical, nebulous, what is an atom? What's quantum mechanics? And that was kind of the birth of all this big questions that no one can understand. And, there's lots of great scientists who say if you pretend to understand quantum mechanics, you're utterly wrong. Like a lot of people are embracing this uncertainty,
Right.
based on this uncertainty principle. And yet, what I find maddening is, especially in the K through 12 chemistry section, how many times have you seen an atom that's drawn like these concentric circles with a
I
little
would
dot
say
on it?
that would be what I would draw if you asked me to draw one.
Right. And when I'm talking about molecular literacy, that's the first thing to go,
Uh,
right?
oh,
Because we know it's a cloud. We know that we cannot predict the location and momentum of an atom. So why are we putting it on a racetrack to communicate to the public that that's where that electron is? And why are teachers, and again, no fault of anybody, but why are teachers continually having kids put 8 electrons around and dot it around and make these little circles? And they get gummy bears out and they have all, I've seen Pinterest full of these things. And I'm just like, this is over 100 years old, folks. Like, and there are over 25 Nobel Prizes from this. The movie Oppenheimer is about these folks. Like, we all know the truth that it's so complicated, nobody can understand it. Why can't we tell that to our kids? So I do. When I'm introducing the structure of the atom, I tell them all this. And I said, we don't know where the edge is. We don't know exactly where the electrons are. We know how many there are, but it would be like if you're in your bedroom and your parents are in watching TV. They know you're in your room, but they don't know if you're on your bed or on your floor or in your closet. They don't know where you are. You know, so I think there's this mystery that needs to be embraced. And chemistry is uncertain all around. Like
right.
it is the discipline of uncertainty, and yet people think just the opposite, and it's a little maddening actually to every time I look around, if I see a scientist website that has that thing on it, I'm like, change your website. You're one of us. You know better. Like, don't do that.
Well, that's really funny.
Yeah.
The wars in the science world. Well, I love the
Well,
discipline.
I think I'm an N of one on that. I don't see a lot of other folks getting all riled up about it, but I do.
That's okay.
So I wouldn't
No,
say it's a war. It's my own private war
oh,
that I'm.
that's really funny. Like the science grammarian kind of, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
That's funny. Well, yeah, the uncertainty thing, well, what's funny is when you were talking, you actually pointed when you were when you were discussing the uncertainty and the idea of people being certain. I think the hand gestures have a lot to do with it. So when a person is like, there's an action, a point, this is my own theory completely, by the way. I think that there's many people like pointing to the spot and they
Yeah.
find great comfort in pointing to the spot. So
Yep.
there's great comfort in my circle, and your
Yes.
little ambiguous cloud is not comfortable to me. So I think, the idea of also what you're doing for these kids, maybe not on purpose, is providing the idea that uncertainty is a comfortable state.
Yep.
And so it's so, which makes their imagination more pliable and malleable as they grow. So
Yep.
when their parents or a teacher are certain, they're like, That becomes uncomfortable, is the people walking around certain. So the kid who's okay with being uncertain and being surrounded by uncertainty is like, wait, the certain people make me uncomfortable because they're pointing at me.
Yeah,
I think it's just like a side, great, like a side beauty to what you're providing, you know?
thank you. Yeah, it is. And I mean, I think the funniest thing with the littles, that's what I call my like 4, 5, 6 year olds.
Yeah.
Um, they love the mystery and uncertainty of Pluto. I don't know why. Like I don't. So sometimes I'm kind of surprised at what I have to facilitate because
Right.
I'm not a planetary scientist. So they ask me all these questions about Pluto. I'm like, I don't know. Like I haven't thought about Pluto in a long time, but they're like, is it a planet? Is it not a planet? Like
Right.
and I'm like, can we be okay with not knowing? And because I'm like, I don't know. Like, why is it so important that we give it a label? And then they kind of sit there and then we move on. Like,
That's
like
actually so fun. That's such a high level of thinking. Like it's okay to place it in there and let it float.
yeah,
You
yeah.
you do not have to attach it to anything at all.
Can't we just let Pluto be? Like,
Yeah, can we like not argue about Pluto?
poor Pluto.
That's
But
so
but but
funny.
it's funny because they love that, and I don't know where somewhere in their lives, in their all of their 5 years, someone brought up this concerning fact about, or not fact, but issue about Pluto,
Yeah.
and I'm like, why can't just let Pluto be?
That is so interesting. It's fun talking like this because even if I mean if I had the same conversation with you a year ago, we would have had a different conversation because of how much we both learned in the
Yeah,
last year, which
yeah.
is so fun. And okay, I have other questions and other things
Okay,
I want to talk about, but I'm kind of obsessed about a little thing that I've been obsessed about. Now, I don't want to tell the whole world before we put it into gear, but I think of the biggest seller for your brain in chemistry, for just to say it, for sales only, would be a book about gas coming from a child or an animal,
uh-huh.
molecular structure that makes the different kinds, the whole, I know this is silly that I'm saying this, but I'm saying the intellectual level would be so high based on the silliness and embracing of farts from kids, right?
Yeah, there.
Like the silent but deadly, if you had like a book that was all about why they are the way they are, I think would actually a lot of people
That's
buy
genius.
that.
I'm gonna write that down because
Okay, I want to do it with you.
yeah, there is a book about who farts, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
this
But
is
that's just like showing that that's saying that it's okay to
the
do so.
humanity, right? The
Yeah,
humanity.
the humanity of it, not the science behind it.
Think
Yeah,
of
no, that's
this.
awesome.
You
Yeah.
could, and you could do it. Okay, I just pictured that little kid going, Mom, can I have broccoli for the next 5 days?
Right,
And in his
exactly.
little brain, he's calculating when
Right.
he's going to do something to someone else with his.
Right.
Okay,
Yes. Yep.
we're doing this. This is our little
Yeah,
side.
that's G. I love it. I love it because it is directly related to if we look at the elements in the garden, right, and whatever we ingest, what comes in comes out, and they all have different properties. Yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
that exciting?
yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I
Isn't
love
that
it.
the
Yeah, that's
funniest thing?
really good. Yeah,
Because, I mean,
funny
people,
and also just great to read. And that's the other thing I've learned. We have a lot of circle time, and I read a lot of children's books. Last 3 years, I've consumed more children's literature than I ever have, and I know what grabs their attention in circle time and what doesn't, and how many words I can have. And, you know, and so I'll pick up a book and I'll be excited to read it. And then I'll open it and I'll see like dense paragraphs. And I'm like, I am not going to have my kindergartner sit still
no,
for this.
no,
Like, I'm like, put that book aside. We're
right.
going to grab If You Give a Mouse a Cookie again, because that's the perfect,
It
you
is.
like,
I did write a children's book based on kind of the of Molly Lou Molly Lou Mellon is her name. Oh my gosh, it's so clever. I love it. But it's this guy, David Catrow, does these pictures for these different books. And every time David Catrow does the pictures, I'm like, I want the book because it's always whoever he matches up with is super clever. But I've had this book in my head, so we make it clever, we make it funny, and we add chemistry.
Yep, exactly.
I
Yep.
just think, I mean, think about the intellect of the kid. He's in second grade. His teacher just read it, or he's reading at his table, and he goes home and his dad's about to take a bite of something. He's like, Dad, guess what?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That's what's gonna, I mean, that level of understanding based on this common human thing.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's genius. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm serious about that. I'm so
Yeah,
excited.
me too. Yeah.
Because I mean, it all just fits because of the way that you're approaching this is that it is a secret Trojan horse that goes in and the kid just gets to have it whenever they want it, whenever they want that information, whenever it starts to click. It could be a day
And
or
it has
two
to
or
be fun. I think it has to be funny. I mean, again, I go back to why I have comics. Like, there has to be jokes. It has to be funny. You have to laugh because it puts you in that space where you can go to the uncertainty. Laughter is comfortable and fun, and then all of a sudden you can be uncomfortable because you're laughing, and it feels safe and it feels creative, right? So all those good things come from the beginning, and you got to, start the fire of laughter with, these ideas, like something that would be funny. So I think with in education in general, and especially, I think in science education, we downplay humor because it's a serious subject. And there's just no way to understand it without upplaying humor.
I just wrote down, okay, the other day I posted on Threads, um, literacy trauma, and someone wrote back, I've never seen these two words in the same sentence. And he just put literacy trauma. I literally wrote down laughter, chemistry, literally two words that have not been put together.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be funny.
Yeah. Why do we have to be so stoic? Oh, we must talk about chemistry this way.
Well, I mean, I have a theory about the genesis of the crazy hair. That goes back to Einstein,
Yeah.
who would never have believed any of this. He was definitely not an elitist. But the crazy hair, the lab coat, the safety goggles, that's a club, right? And it's a costume.
Uh,
And you saw from my TED Talk, I wore an apron, not a lab coat. I
I,
refuse to go on anything with the white coat because to me that symbolizes the club, right? And that club is serious and not going to laugh and going to keep a lot of people out. And so and the apron represents a little bit more of a female approach, right? And so it's a periodic table apron that has all the elements on it, so that's consistent with what I want to bring to the world. But it's a way that something you wear in the kitchen where there's a lot of elements. It's something that's accessible to everyone, and it has traditionally it could reach young women who are thinking science isn't for them. Well, she's wearing an apron. Maybe it is for me because I like to make homemade jams or whatever. You
right.
know? So there's a lot of subtle symbolism that when I get in what I call my character, and my character is that like, let's be, the person for everybody and not be part of the club. So, yeah, a little side note on all of that.
No, I like that. And I know I'm not going to bring up the conversation we had before, only so that we can keep
Yeah.
everyone help everyone stay in their lanes that way. So no one gets mad at us. But I we know the lanes they want to come at us. But I told someone the other day all the straw men are coming for me. I'm like, let's go. Anyway, um I have a kid, young person, teacher that I work with, and like I was just trying to give her some ideas in her science class, like through my ideas, through. But now I'm gonna throw you at her, but or her at you. But I was like, why not have a lab coat like that is not given for the traditional, like lab coat of the week or the day, right? That kid gets a lab coat, not for 100% on their test, but for something obviously that's accessible to everyone and making that little jump. And I just thought that'd be kind of fun, but I, because it's a neurological representation, right, of scientist, right? And so I love the idea. It's not like I hate that idea now, but now I have to reconsider it because it's just a way of putting them into a position where they're like, oh, I didn't see myself that way, now I do. But I like your position of I don't see myself that way, but I can. Like I love the concept that they're really just all costumes. I've
Yeah.
been saying for a very long time there is no hierarchy, and I'm getting more people around me that go, hey, there's no hierarchy. I'm like, yeah, it's fake,
Yeah.
completely fake. All of it is fake. That's so interesting. Yeah, I love that idea. Me too, right? Me too. I can be that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, imagine if your physician came in to, give you whatever, an exam and was in a t-shirt and jeans. I think we need to do more of that. Like, why do they have to wear the costume? Because that costume then represents this barrier to communication. It's unidirectional. It's, for the most part. I mean, there's lots of approachable physicians out there, but the costume then that white lab coat transcends scientists. It goes into medicine too, right? And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden you put that on and somehow you're an expert. Well, you don't put a costume on and become an expert. Otherwise I'd put a cape on and wear that all day so I could fly. Like, you know, if that was true, why
Yeah.
not ditch the apron and go for a cape? Because so I've always questioned why people expect scientists to look a certain way, or and I include physicians in that, in that whole costume. It creates barriers, really.
Oh, yeah, completely. I actually been talking about instead of this costume, but I've been talking about this costume, right? This
Right.
costume and the voice box. I'm like, this costume's the one that I got. I can only do so much if people don't hear what I'm saying, you know? Because, and the clothes, I mean, obviously that's the mega, and it's such a costume, but I think that, we all have to broaden our definitions. I mean, really, that's why we're here is to broaden the idea of science, to broaden the idea of molecular literacy, to broaden the idea of who can be a scientist, broaden the idea of who can understand science,
Right.
right? And then we broaden those definitions, they become bigger, and we can, instead of bumping into each other with my definition, I don't ram into you with my definition. Instead, we broaden and then you speak, and then I broaden, and then I speak, and then you broaden, and
Yep.
then it's just this bigger coming together, which I really
100%. Yeah.
enjoy. And then there's more people inside that embrace, right?
Right.
Get more
Yeah.
people. Yeah. That must be, have you ever had a kid who went through your program at a young age and then walked into the program that they would have previously failed had they not been introduced to you? Has that happened yet? That kind
Not
of,
yet. It's too early.
it
We've
is,
only,
right? Okay. Because you
yeah.
just left the college
Yeah.
arena.
So I'm about 2.5, 3 years into it. And so the littles that I've taught haven't had the experience yet to
Yeah,
even
okay.
high school yet.
So
So
not too far away though.
yeah. Yeah.
See how
Yeah.
accessible it is. Yeah. So interesting. This is so fun. I have so many notes, but then they all became crazy. But I love the discipline of uncertainty. I did write that down too. The discipline of uncertainty. That's fun little, isn't that an oxymoron? Right?
I think so, but it's what it is.
Yeah,
And you need that, you need the space up here and in here to embrace that.
right. And it does take a degree of curiosity and confidence in that, like you're saying, I love the discipline of it. Like it's okay. It's not going to harm me to expand,
Right.
if I
Right.
can allow for that. Um, and I love the idea of laughter and chemistry. Like I've been dying to tell this gassy thing to somebody, which is so funny because I didn't even bother because I know most people would like shut me down and you're like, oh, that's a good idea. Like, thank goodness I told you. I
Yeah,
just
it's a really good idea. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's so much we could do with it.
really is that chemistry is just like, and
Yeah,
you're sneaking it in.
you're sneaking it in. Yeah.
Yeah, that Trojan horse is such a powerful little metaphor. Is there
Yeah.
anything I forgot to ask you or that you'd like to express on here?
I think something going back to what brought us together. I use the word molecular literacy for a reason. First of all, I've avoided the word chemistry because of the trauma associated with that. So going back to your work, right?
Mhm.
Chemistry is a word that can evoke a traumatic feeling for a
Right.
lot of people, especially as a course. Molecular just seems soft, and I
Mhm.
want to be soft, right? Not only do I want to have laughter, but I want to have softness, right? Because I think that's a better way. Soft things smooth out, they bubble, they smush, right? They're so much better.
Mhm.
Um, so I use the word molecular and I use the word literacy because um, as they're learning to read in your world, right? As reading becomes part of these developing minds, whether they're 3 to 103, it doesn't matter, you know. Um, it's the same process, right? So what you're doing will feed into what I'm doing. What you're doing has to come first, though, because my world is also built on letters. And so I guess it doesn't have to come. Yeah, it does. Yeah, because you need to be able to sound out the word calcium, for example.
Actually, my work is not exactly what you're saying, though. My work comes after that has already occurred. My real work is not in the beginning of
Not
like
the development. Yeah,
no, not so much in the development here we are, how we have a 9 year old, and now what? So actually, you have it's however it comes this way. So the way that I talk about my literacy is like my experience is the kids that I work with or meet or whatever, who's disengaged from, they're going that way. So their reading is that direction. And so I just help them turn it and come this way. So if your molecular literacy sneaks its way in, then I don't even have to come around. Even if they get it from you, but not from their literacy teacher,
got
it's
it.
still got in. So you could again, you're even the literacy Trojan horse, the actual, in so
Yeah,
many
yeah,
different ways. Yeah.
yeah. And as you were speaking, and yeah, now, yeah, I definitely better understand it. So as you were speaking, it would be an interesting study to see where students are struggling in chemistry because it is so dependent on letters, right?
Mm.
Do they have literacy trauma? Is that really what's behind all of these failures in chemistry? And I would posit yes, because it's a letter based, and everyone goes, no, it's quantitative, there's numbers. Those numbers are like numbers in a recipe. I'm sorry. Like, if it's H2O, that two just means there's two hydrogens. It's not math. Like people are like, oh, it's all math. Like, let's get rid of that. That's a whole different conversation for you and I. But going back to the dependence on letters, and letters as being critically important and assembling them, and there's a lot of letters on a page sometimes, and a periodic table looks like an alphabet. So I'm just wondering if that your type of literacy trauma, not your type, but what you have discovered, informs molecular literacy trauma.
I'm gonna go with like 200 million% chance because
Yeah,
I'm just like blown away. Like it never occurred to me till you're saying it right now because it's their, they're making meaning of printed letters, printed words, and they're making meaning. If they're not interested and they've been harmed by making meaning and something harmed them earlier over here, then they're over here still trying to learn, you know, H is for hydrogen, and they're not putting it in here, but it's still out here, and there's so much to talk about this, but a lot of it's a safety issue, right?
right.
Emotional safety. Well, it hasn't been safe going this way, so I'm going to go this way. Or there was never an opportunity to go this way, so I go that way. So you're asking people who have all of this on the outside, and then you're introducing some new idea, and they're like, no, I actually still hate those things. Like,
Yeah,
that is such an interesting concept because you're creating a relationship. You're building on you as a molecular literacy, so whatever age or grade that is. Well, if it can help the child embrace, like let go of their literacy trauma and embrace a new idea of understanding, then it obviously can do the opposite and be a hindrance.
Right, right, right.
Period.
Yeah.
So the kid's 8 years old, it's either going to help, and it can help either way, especially because you make it fun, you make it light, you get that Trojan horse, you just trample right into their little brain. You're like, hey. So then they're like, oh, I like this now. You
But
change
it's the 20-year-old brain that
the
and the
20.
reason and that's the reason I asked that because in the 20-year-old brain, they may have literacy trauma and avoided English language arts and those kind of
Right,
disciplines,
right.
gone the science route and gone the science route because they can use math, right? And then when they get to chemistry, there is there there is math, but there's also a heck of a lot of letters, right? Right? And so everyone says, "Well, you're good at math, you're going to be good at science." And I would love to see the study that shows that because I in my heart, and I don't have any evidence to prove this, I don't believe that's true. I believe that you have to have confidence with numbers, and there's some skills and strategies you can use that will help you to in science. But I also feel like the literacy piece, and I always go back to myself as a first generation science or first generation college student. What did I have? We had nothing. My grandma worked in a bookstore. I had books, and I
Mhm.
had books from my grandma, and we read and we laughed, and we did that till she died. So that's all I had. I didn't have chemistry kits. I had a typewriter. I was supposed to be a secretary. So I'm a good typist. I went to a lot of typing school, and all of that. So I was not, I am not on the path that was set for me. But the reason I think I'm able to do it so joyfully is because of reading.
Honestly, I feel very nauseous, I think is the correct word. Like, I think it's upsetting to me to not realize how many kids have been affected in chemistry class because of an aversion that occurred in childhood with literacy, and then it affects them when they're 20. Like, I've already been upset about a lot of things, but like you just introduced a whole new idea of why I'm even on this mission anyway. And I cannot wait to like investigate that more and talk about that more that you said that now because holy crap, because I try to tell people it's a simple aversion and they're like, no, there must be. And I'm like, what do you avoid? Why do you have an aversion? And like it's hard to convey to somebody that they may be wrong, that there's nothing wrong with the children. There's just an aversion. And then they keep that aversion long enough, then it becomes something that you're not interested in all, or something that harms you later. Like there's such an I there's been such an idea that all of these things must be done this way in order for this to happen. And I don't think, now I'm not saying don't introduce these concepts, but do them so that the relationship is maintained.
Yep. Yeah.
Period.
Because
Positive.
I think what we uncovered is it's not only literacy. It will affect, and especially when they think they found what they're good at, right? And then all of a sudden they're 20 and they're like, okay, I'm not good at reading. I'm not a reading and liberal arts person, but I'm a science person. I hear that all the time. I don't even know what that means. But um, and then they become a science person, and then all of a sudden there's literacy again. And it's like, oh, okay, how am I going to get around this?
Right?
And and the fact is you can't. Um, I mean, there's workarounds. Certainly you can become if you're more of a I mean, a little bit, but it's never comfortable, right? It will
Not,
always be an uncomfortable workaround.
not healthy to work around.
No, no, no. Yeah. I guess that's what. And just one last thing, I always go back to my childhood, and that's the only thing I had was books. I had, I was raised feral, like we all were back in the day. Like my parents didn't even know where I was. I was reading. That's where I was. Like I just loved books. And it's an imagine it's you know all the value of books, but that's all I had. I didn't have a science kit. I didn't go to STEM camp. Um, my parents sold insurance and worked in a nursing home. They had no interest in science. Like there was no science in my household at all. 100%. And nor was there any emphasis on higher education. I was the first person to go to college. And that was like, why are you doing that for? That's not a good idea. You can get a really good job as a secretary. Look at you type in 70 words a minute. And I was cranking. But, I just think the only thing I had were books. And so if books were the key to me becoming a chemistry professor, working in a Nobel Prize winning lab, like doing big, big, big league chemistry, why isn't that looked at a little bit more carefully? And I know I'm an N of one, but at least that's the only thing I know.
That
And why are we sending kids to all these STEM camps and blowing stuff up and making slime when there's I know that doesn't work. So, why are we taking the literacy out of it when that's the key piece?
I there's such an avoidance. Well, the kids can't, and I don't know what to do about it. I'm like, it's not as hard as you think. It's really not. Like, um, that first step is just like, tell me about literacy. And then the kid tells you their trauma. I actually had someone steer into my lane to yell at me about using the word trauma. I'm going to use the word trauma because if you're carrying something for 50 years and it still harms you, I'm going to go with that's your word. Trauma is correctly being used. But if you can go back and someone listens to you and you go, oh, and you tell your story and then someone says, I'm sorry that happened, it reduces the pain of that and you can it becomes malleable because otherwise it's stuck, right? And so it's not actually impossible to unstick it for those chemistry kids in 20, but wow, I can't believe it's a whole nother, it's like you just open a whole nother world of um harm to me. It's like you went, oh, by the way, did you think about these people? And I'm like, no, thanks, Colleen.
At any time. But it's what keeps us going, right? Like we both know this is hard and tiring and exhausting work. And you can't unsee it. So there it is.
No, I know. I feel like I'm exhausted now.
I know.
We're gonna let people go, and then I did want to tell you one more thing secretly behind their backs. So, do you have
Okay.
pretty good now that
No,
we
I'm good now. Yeah. I got
class?
it. I got that off my chest. I'm good. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. Okay, I'm gonna end with my little closure here, which is thank you for listening to Define This. I'm Daphne Russell, the self-proclaimed education evolutionist, talking about teaching and learning and all that in between. I hope today's conversation stirred something in you, maybe a memory, a shift, or even a quiet definition of your own, because the words we carry matter. And when we broaden what they mean to us, we change what's possible for us. If this episode moved you, share it with someone who might be ready to revisit a word they thought they understood. And thank you so much, Colleen Kelley. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.